Hey guys, Palsteron here. And today let's talk about my accuracy stacker, Venom Gyre, Juggernaut. So it's not like 6 weeks into the league, and I was kind of getting a little bit burned out. I could start to feel it. So I kind of thought, why not do like a Hail Mary build, like something where I throw all my currency into. And what better to do than make an accuracy stacker? In this case, I went for Venom Gyre as the skill. You can do other skills as well, but Venom Gyre is just an incredibly nice mapper, while still having really good single target damage with the Whirling Blades interaction. If you've never seen an accuracy stacker before and never played one, I actually made a video all about how it gets its damage and how it scales just into absurd dimensions. So while we are going to go over it throughout this video a little bit more, definitely check out that video if you are planning on playing the build. I will go over Venom Gyre in a second, but I definitely want to shout out Kobe Black Mamba. He basically just put out a lot of Venom Gyre videos. I didn't really believe in the skill, but he just kept pushing and pushing, and at some point I was just like, all right, I'm gonna do a build. With that being said, let's get into the video. All right, so here we are, level 100 Juggernaut. I'm gonna quickly talk a little bit about how Venom Gyre works and why I really like it on this build. Now, Venom Gyre is an attack, also projectile, and it has a chaos tag, although we do not have anything to do with poison or chaos at all. Because we're scaling lightning damage through Storm Rider boots, which give you 1 to 6 added lightning damage per 200 accuracy. Basically, what the skill does is it's like a different version of Spectral Throw, but it has a lot more going on. So the skill has 60% of physical damage converted to chaos, which is completely irrelevant for us. It just means that you can't really do physical to Ellie, right? It has to be flat Ellie, which doesn't need any conversion. Otherwise, it's going to be chaos damage, right? Now, the projectiles return to you just as with Spectral Throw. We throw them out, they come back to us. First up, the returning projectiles deal 75% less damage. So for example, if you have something like Spectral Throw, the incoming and the returning projectile both do the same amount of damage, but in this case, it's more about the outgoing projectiles. But the projectiles that you catch actually do something. So I want you to look at the upper left corner. Whenever they come back, I'm kind of like catching them, and it says Venom Gyre Blades. Now what happens with these blades is whenever I Whirling Blades while having these blades, they will be basically consumed and they will be shot upwards, which, as you can imagine, makes for a really smooth mapping playstyle. I'm going to show you this in Blood Aqueducts real quick. So we put on Blood Rage. So we shoot them out, and now the next time we're Whirling Blading, we can basically just do this and everything next to us just dies, right? Because it just throws them out. It does a lot of damage while whirling around. So you kind of like shoot, whirl, everything dies, shoot, whirl, and so forth. Basically having like a semi-auto bomber. You also have 40% chance to actually keep the caught projectiles. So whenever you Whirling Blade, you don't consume all of them. As you can see here, let's quickly get 30 stacks here. 30 stacks. Whenever we whirl, 15 of them stay. So around about 40%. Now it's 7. Now it's free, and so forth. So it's not just that you can whirl once. You can whirl several times. You can also do this with a Helm enchant that gives you even more chance to keep our projectiles. We don't really use it in this case, but it's a really good choice as well. Now, the important thing to note with this Whirling Blade interaction is that these projectiles can actually shotgun against enemies. So all of these projectiles can hit the same target, which is 30, right? That's a lot. The thing about it is, though, it really depends on how big of a hitbox your enemy has. So against bosses like Maven or Cyrus, you will obviously hit more than against smaller ones. And the way you want to do this against bosses is it has a little bit of science to it. First up, you want to not have always attack without moving on. If you activate it, this doesn't work. Now, in order to show you this, I quickly got on my Ancestral Bond so I can show you how this actually works, what name locking actually means in that situation. So to show you how you do this, let's quickly get some charges. So basically, whenever there's a boss, let's say one of these is a boss, right? Basically, what you have to do is after you get the stacks, you hover over them. And if you name lock, it basically does this over and over and over and over. The important thing is you cannot click or hold your move button while you do this. Otherwise, this happens. It doesn't work, right? You have like 30 blades, and then if you want to get the most out of it, you want to be on top of your enemy, you do this, and it just goes over and over, consumes all the blades. You attack again, you whirl over it, you attack again, and so forth and so forth. And this Whirling Blade interaction really increases your single target DPS. So whatever DPS you have in PoE, you can be sure that it's actually more. This is outgoing projectile. You also have to add the returning projectile that comes back, and then whatever the Whirling Blades really does. It's definitely worth it, but I couldn't really give a number to it. I just know that it's more than whatever's here. Now, as for our defenses, we're stun and slow immune. Now, I don't want to say completely slow immune. There are slows that actually aren't mitigated by this, but Unstoppable is extremely strong on a Juggernaut, obviously, kind of a no-brainer. We're ailment immune, we have Purity of Elements, so that's basically done. We have 50k plus armor with our Flasks up, and the cool thing about that is with the Juggernaut we also have Unbreakable, so it also counts for elemental damage, and that is complemented by the 80 max res that we have. We get 2% from the chest, as well as 2% here, and another 1% here. With 100% spell suppression, the thing about this build is it's really, really hard to get spell suppression on your gear. So basically, we got really, really carried by the passive tree getting massive buffs when it comes to spell suppression. For a lot of builds, it was actually bad that the gear got nerfed and the passive tree got buffed, but for this build in particular, it's actually superb. We just throw on Mage Bane, we have reflexes, and we have this cluster, and we're basically capped. We also have 14k evasion and 30% block, just to get a little bit of avoidance in there. I think 14k evasion is around about 57% chance to avoid, so that's pretty nice, 30% block on top, and also endurance charges to kind of round it up. As for recovery, definitely one of our weaker parts of the build. We do have 2k plus life gain on hit, which is huge. While we're in combat, basically nothing is really going to kill us. We don't have any leech. You can do that if you feel like it's not overkill. For example, you can take stuff like Clever Thief. We have decent Chaos Res. Now, my gear isn't perfect. I actually don't need this Fire Res right here. If you can recraft that to Chaos Resistance, you could actually be capped with an Amethyst Flask. Chaos damage for this build is really hard. Once again, we do have Chaos Res wherever we can get, but there's a lot of uniques in the build, so it's kind of rough to get in general. But Arch Nemesis dots are just nasty, right? So that is something where you can die. Also, the thing about Juggernaut is it doesn't really do that much against dots. We're kind of relying on Unbreakable and Armor to carry us, which doesn't really help. One thing I will say, though, is that in terms of Pantheons, we are using Soul of Arakali to kind of get around that with the 40 Chaos Res against Chaos damage over time. Because what happens a lot is if you're just walking around and there's like Chaos dots all over there, sometimes you don't have your Amethyst Flask up. So that's really nice. And then also 10% reduced damage from damage over time taken. It's just really, really strong. We're also taking the Soul of Aberrath. We are Ignite immune, but being Burning Ground immune nowadays, especially if you're using Searing Exarch influence, is just too strong. Probably the question that I get asked the most is why not Berserker? The full reason is I just don't like to be squishy on a character that's extremely expensive, right? If I'm expensive, I want to have something like an Aura Stacker or something like an Accuracy Stacker that actually has a few defenses. I don't feel like you need more damage. This build has way too much damage already, which is also a reason why I'm not using Doryani's prototype, for example. You're just going to get one shot to lightning dots, which is really annoying. So overall, that's why I chose Juggernaut. It has enough damage, more than enough damage. You just don't need it. Now, if you had more of a budget version and you don't have that luxury, I would probably go for Berserker. There is a few problems, though. So what are the payoffs of Berserker? Well, you go Aspect of Carnage, which is incredibly strong. And then you're thinking about Rage. But the problem is Rage actually isn't that good on this build. And the main reason for that is that you just have so much attack speed and increased damage already. So if we look at the increased attack speed, we have 704%. And that's mainly just because we have Undeniable, right? If you're Berserker, you have to get a Forbidden Flesh and a Forbidden Flame with Undeniable, because this is basically what makes this build tick. Once again, check out my video down in the description. But this gives you 1% attack speed per 150 accuracy, and we have 87,000. So you can imagine how that goes. So usually, Rage is really strong, right? It gives you nice attack speed, nice increased damage. On this build, it does barely anything. So for example, if I show you this real quick, if I put on the Rage, 60 Rage, look at what happens to my damage. It's almost nothing, whereas on some other builds, it's actually a game changer. If we take this here, this is a mere like extra 17% more damage, whereas on other builds, it would actually be really, really strong. Next problem is that Blitz, incredibly strong, right? You get a lot of crit. You could probably make it so you have way too much crit and then the reduced crit doesn't do anything at all, right? Sure, but there is a cap to how much attack speed you can actually have. So if we look at this here, do you use Blitz charges? You will see here, this is kind of weird, right? 30.30, that is a very ominous number. It should go up higher because it's 40% more, right? And 25% times 1.4, well, it should be at 35. Why isn't it? Well, that is because there's actually a cap to how much attack speed you can get. For example, if we put in Blitz charges right here, and we're at the max, which is 30.30, and I would type in 1,000% increased attack speed, you could see here, nothing would happen. So TLDR on really, really good gear, it's kind of hard to make use of Berserker like you would want to. At the end of the day, though, it's still more damage. I'm just saying it feels like kind of overkill to me personally, but let's go into what makes Juggernaut really good. So note that this build revolves around is Undeniable. You always need this node, which is why you can only do Accuracy Stacker on either Juggernaut, Chieftain, which doesn't really make much sense, or Berserker, right? Because you can get Forbidden Flesh, Forbidden Flame for Undeniable. If you're Juggernaut, you just take it. We have Unstoppable, which gives you movement speed, cannot be stunned. It makes you kind of slow immune. It's just really, really nice. If we didn't add Purity of Elements, it would also make us freeze immune because our action speed cannot be slowed. However, it doesn't really matter because in this case, we kind of want purity anyways. We have a Watcher's Eye with 50% Chaos Res, and it's really hard to get Chaos Res on this build, so that really helps out. Unflinching gives us endurance charges. It's kind of like the last point you want to take, and Unbreakable is just such a buff in general for Juggernaut. So this node is just incredibly strong because it kind of fixes a problem that Juggernaut had a lot of the time. On Juggernaut, going max res is kind of awkward because you kind of want to go armor, but you don't want to do too much on armor. In this case, it kind of rewards you. You can go as high as you want. You still have something that mitigates ally damage. So if I have Molten Shell deactivated, you can see here around about 46, 48k max hit, and if I were to remove this, it will go down to like 20k. So that is huge. Now, obviously, a thing is that armor gets worse and worse the bigger the hit. So for example, if we did cold damage here, right, and it's at 46k max hit, and we say there's like a bigger hit, like a 5,000 hit, then obviously your max hit goes down because armor gets less effective. But the thing about it is elemental damage has a lot more smaller hits. So unless you're like facing a boss, Unbreakable will basically make you kind of feel immune. And against bosses, it's still like 50 to 100% more max hit. So yeah, if this node didn't exist, I would say it's actually kind of close between Berserker and Juggernaut. But with this node, I personally would always go for Juggernaut. Now, next up, let's go over items. Basically, I'm first going to talk about the items that are necessary that you cannot cut, and the items that are kind of like not replaceable, but that aren't as like rigid. Let's put it that way. Oscarms are a no-brainer. You have to use Oscarms. If you can get +1 Frenzy Charge, that is huge because of the rings we're about to talk about. Just these gloves alone get you crit capped. And that's because of the 2% increased attack critical strike chance per 200 accuracy. That scales to ridiculous numbers. Obscurantis is also a must-have. It gives you up to 1,000 accuracy and increased projectile damage per 200 accuracy. If you can get a enchant, definitely go for the buff effect of Ice Golems. Ice Golems are completely crazy. You might think, oh, how am I going to get the Ice Golem up? We're going to talk about that in the gem section. It's actually not that hard. If you get the 90% cost reservation multiplier, that will help a ton. Will make it a lot easier to fit all your auras in. And Stormrider boots are basically what makes this build tick. Before these boots existed, this archetype wasn't really viable. It gives you 1 to 6 added lightning damage per 200 accuracy, basically freeing up your weapon to have like no base damage and you still do a ton of damage. What you have on them is up to you. I went for the good old Tailwind Onslaught. We don't need elusive because you already get it from Nightblade, and then just some movement speed on top. Big items here are precursors, emblems. These can get incredibly expensive if the build gets more and more like used and played. There's not that many out there of these. They're actually not that hard to make, but there's only that many basically available because they only drop from Delve. And these are actually made by a vendor recipe. You can look it up on the wiki how that exactly works. If I press Alt here, there's 3 mods here. 2 of them are increased accuracy rating per frenzy charge. You can get up to 3 of these. So you can get up to 36% increased accuracy rating. If you're wondering, the last 2 or 4% come from the attack quality. Yeah, the way it works is you really want those 2. The 3rd mod is not really that important. And while, yes, theoretically, you could go for budget and go for a 12% increased accuracy rating instead of a 24%, but I just want to show you what happens to your damage. If you do that, you go from 69k down to 36k, which means you're basically halving your damage. Once again, that is why this build archetype is just incredibly expensive, because it scales so well with currency. There's really never an end to how strong you can make a character like this. My gear in the whole scheme of things is very high in terms of currency, but it could still be way higher. When it comes to weapon, you really want a claw. It gives you a lot of life gain on hit. It also lets you use Nightblade support, which we're going to over later. Basically, you just want a lot of links here. Increased crit damage, ally damage with attacks. The 40% more attack damage is really strong. Just as many links as you can get. And then you want a square on top to just get a massive amount of damage. As for chest, you can go for something more aggressive, like a replica Shroud of the Lightless. I'm not really sure how to fit that in because you would lose 6 gem sockets, so I wasn't really sure how to do that. I just went for a lot of life and just kind of fill up my resistances that I was missing. Also gives me, the Fortify right here is actually not something you want to do. That was back when I was Lightning Strike, which we're going to go over in a different video. Basically, what you want here is you want Determination Aura Effect, and you want +2 to all max Riz. As for belt, your best option is a Mageblood. After that, a Darkness Enthroned with accuracy, a Headhunter, whatever you want. As for Amulet, your GG would be basically this, but mirrored in the Lake of Kalandra. I never got to it. I just didn't. I bricked, I think, 18 attempts or something. So yeah, I'm done with that. A Simplex Amulet would be the best because there's not really that much else you need. You want accuracy, you want crit multi. The proc speed really is kind of cute, but I would rather probably have life at this point. And the minus mana cost will help a lot because you have so many attacks per second. Like we're talking, I think 20 to 30 attacks per second, depending on whether your totem is up. So you're never going to be able to sustain your mana unless your mana cost is at round about 2 or 3. As for the stuff in your belt, you want a ton of accuracy, life, and then also the chance to avoid bleeding. So this Darkness Inferno basically gives you a 75% increased effect. So with 30% chance to avoid bleeding, that is actually 52. Once again, it doesn't do decimals, so it's 52. And then you get 28% from here. 28 times 1.75 right here is 49. So in total, I have 101% chance to avoid bleeding, which basically makes me bleed immune. And I also have corrupted blood immunity on a different jewel. I have Forbidden Flesh, Forbidden Flame for Aspect of Carnage, a lot more damage. Alternatively, you can also go for Blitz, which will decrease the damage you do per hit. You actually have a lot of damage, so that will make your shock a lot worse. It will also mean you're probably going to hit the attack speed cap. Overall, Blitz is a lot worse, but also a lot cheaper. Watcher's Eye, the most important mod here is the Chaos Resistance while you have Purity of Elements. This is just completely huge because we don't have that many ways to get Chaos Res. Crit Multi Precision isn't that big of a deal. We already have a lot of Crit Multi from the Nightblade. And then the damage taken during Purity of Elements. Other good mods would be something like you could do Vitality if you can somehow fit it into the gems with life gain on hit or something like that. Maybe precision with flash charges. And let's talk about stuff that's positioned on your passive tree. We have split personalities right here. One split personality with accuracy and int, and one with accuracy and strength. This kind of fixes your strength and int issues. These aren't crazy good. Like, we're not building around them. They're just very, very solid and better than basically any other option. We have a Transcended Spirit right here. It just gives you a ton of accuracy. That's the TLDR up here. We have 2 more, which we're going to talk about in a second. Other than that, we have a Impossible Escape here with the Imbalanced Guard, which makes us able to get the Soul of Steel right here. The Prismatic Skin, this helps a lot. The more max risk we have, the more our armor works for the elemental damage reduction. Don't underestimate kinetic impacts. The one line here is 5% chance to deal double damage. This gives us way better shock potential, which is huge. And obviously, Eagle Eye is just an absolute premium point. So definitely pick up this Impossible Escape if you can. And then we have this crazy combo here in the middle. So we have Brutal Restraint here, which is a timeless jewel. Usually you would say, okay, so this is like for, I don't know, giving you effect of non-curse aura, giving you increased maximum life for your notables. No, that also doesn't matter. We don't care about the keystone. We don't care about the notables. All we care about is the small nodes here. As you can see, +4 dexterity on unallocated nodes, which is what we use with Transcended Spirits because they give you increased accuracy per dexterity on unallocated nodes. So everywhere where these 2 radiuses overline, all of this dexterity here is getting converted into accuracy. And we have this ×2, one up here and one here, and then the Brutal Restraint right here. So to kind of show you just how crazy this is, I'm just going to show you what happens if I remove these 3. So we're 69 mil damage. If we remove this 3, we're, basically at 1/3 of our damage. When it comes to Flasks, it's pretty straightforward. Granite, increased armor. Jade, increased evasion. Movement speed. Quicksilver Flask. All right. We have a Amethyst Flask. Like I said, Chaos Res is a big weakness of this build. We have some reduced effect of curses, which is nice, especially against something like Enfeeble, which gives you actually less accuracy, which is really annoying. Dying Sun, really cute, just gives you additional projectiles, so we don't have to use GMP. Small tip, if you're using Mageblood, definitely get reduced mana cost on one of these. Then you can basically fix your mana, and you don't have to think about it on your amulet or on the replica Conqueror's efficiency down here. Let's talk about gem setups. Our main gem is Venom Gyre. You really want it to be Divergent because you get an extra chain. We are already using Awakened Fork, but it's really nice to have the chain on top. The other qualities aren't really that crazy. The more forks you have, the more projectiles will return to you, the more Whirling Blades you can do on top of the enemy. It's incredibly strong. Awakened Fork is like completely transforms how this skill works. Nightblade gives you a ton of elusive, ton of crit. It's just incredibly, incredibly strong. Divergent additional accuracy rating. One important thing to know about this is it gives you 4% increased attack damage per 1,000 accuracy rating on 20 quality, right? And this goes up by 10s. So at 30 quality, it goes up even more. You really want 22 quality or more because then when you put it into a Squire, which gives you 8% quality of socketed support gem, all of a sudden it's 6% increased attack damage per 1,000 accuracy instead. That's actually quite a big of a deal. That's another 10 to 15% more damage. We have Awakened Lightning Pen. We're not Omni. We don't have any other way. This is super important. It also gives you lightning exposure from level 5 onwards, and Divergent Inspiration because it's simply impossible to keep up your mana if you don't have it. One small tip for mana as well is get one of these jewels with mana on enemy hit. 2 will completely do it. If you cannot get that, probably get this point here. As for what do you want in your Squire, you want Anomalous Nightblade. It gives you a more elusive effect, incredibly strong. Like we talked about, the Divergent additional accuracy and the Divergent Inspiration if you need extra reduced mana cost. As far as 6-link in our body armor, this is an Awakened Enhance setup. Now, if you can only afford Enhance, so be it, but Awakened Enhance is incredibly strong. The most important thing about the Enhance setup is the Anomalous Blood Rage. Half of our damage, or even more, comes from these precursor emblems and having your frenzy charges up. So having the Anomalous Blood Rage, which gives you a chance to gain a frenzy charge when you hit a unique enemy, is incredibly strong. If you're in a map, you're always going to be on 7, and 2% chance is not that much, but with Awakened Enhance, that goes up to 5. With a normal Enhance 4, it goes up to 4, which is going to help you out a lot. The way you want to approach this against bosses is you kind of want to pre-fire, and then you have like 30 stacks, right? You wait for the boss to pop up, and the first thing you do is whirl into them and do the name-locking stuff that I talked about. So all those projectiles go out, and you immediately get a bunch of frenzy charges. So everything in the 6-link now basically gets its quality increased. Anomalous Blood and Sand, we want in Sand Stance, so it gives us the projectile speed. Venom Gyre doesn't feel really good without any projectile speed. This with an Awakened Enhance gives you straight up 55% increased prot speed, basically more than enough. We also have Anomalous Warbanner. The quality here gives us increased accuracy, which is incredibly strong. And then we also have Sniper's Mark with Mark on Hit. Yeah, Sniper's Mark is also really, really good with the Enhance. We're already kind of crit capped, so the Assassin's Mark actually doesn't do that much, and Sniper's Mark is just incredible for Venom Gyre because it gives you so many extra projectiles, right? It kind of gives this effect where projectiles split and those also come back to you. It's just incredibly strong. So that kind of overrides the Oscar. Then we have a 4-link setup with our Whirling Blades. We have Whirling Blades with actually cast on crit. And the reason for that is we're whirling over a lot of enemies, which then resummons your Ice Golems. Now, resummoning Ice Golems is so annoying. You really want to kind of have that automated. As a lot of people know, that's the reason why I don't have them in a lot of builds. As well as that, Tornado is kind of nice because it can be a collision. So you can fork on it, you can produce more projectiles, which then come back to you. It's just really nice quality of life. This is kind of our 4-link, and this is why you want to aggressively Whirling Blades against bosses. Our aura setup in our helmet with the 90% cost reservation multiplier is Determination, Anomalous Precision. We're not using Grace. It does not fit into the build. That's why we only have around about 14k evasion, but it's still more than enough. I personally prefer Purity of Elements. I want to be ailment immune. I want to get the Watcher's Eye with the Chaos Res. It's just too strong. And then an Enlighten at the end. If you have an Enlighten 5, which costs like 100 divines right now, you can probably do some stuff and get even more auras in there. Our cost of an image taken is basically just Vile Molten Shell. As always, incredibly strong. We have 50k armor. It's an easy choice. We have Phantasmal Ancestral Protector. We put it down against bosses. You put it down, you can pre-fire faster because you have extra attack speed. It's just more damage. And also Withering Step. This is basically there to kind of reset the elusive on our Nightblade, so we have higher effective uptime. And this one you just put on your left click. So for example, if it's here, you just put it here. And it doesn't have a cast time, so whenever it's up, it's just gonna automatically activate. As for our passive tree, we're looking for increased maximum life and accuracy. Accuracy is basically just doing everything across all fronts. It gives you flat damage, increased attack speed, everything, right? So we're looking for, I guess, crit multi, which we already get for Nightblade, but the rest we want from the passive tree. And we get the accuracy from Weathered Hunter right here, from Acuity, and from Depth Perception. The masteries we want is the Dexterity grants 3 accuracy per dexterity instead of 2. The 40 increased accuracy rating against unique. This is actually crazy. It's like 12% more damage against bosses, as well as that the Precision Mana Reservation efficiency if you need it. Otherwise, this combo is just, you can't replace it basically. Anything else? Charisma. I actually had a version without Charisma, but in the end, the projectile speed that we got from fitting in the extra Anomalous Blood and Sand is just crazy, crazy strong. We go for Revenge of the Hunted here. This here is basically just for the Dagger Mastery, which gives us crit multi that gets scaled by all the elusive effect, which is just huge because we kind of have a problem. We don't get that much crit multi overall because we get everything per accuracy but crit multi. So we kind of want to compensate for that. It also gives extra elusive effect right here. Transcended Spirit is up here. It's just really, really good. There's a lot of unallocated dexterity in this region. The two clusters are basically both the same. They are Fan of Blades and Martial Prowess in the front, and in order to do that, you need the Seize Vector as your third notable. If you want to take these extra 2 points, you can also get a different one. You can also get Devastator for Explodey if you really want to, but these two have to be in there. Martial Prowess is just the best notable. It gives you accuracy. It's super, super strong. And Fan of Blades, you're not going to have enough projectiles. You're going to have to run like GMP, which is awful, right? So 2 times this, and the Dying Sun gives you 5 projectiles. Other than that, we're obviously scaling all of the frenzy charges. We have Savagery Anointed, and then we have Fervor and Frenetic here. Anything else that really stands out? Not really. Once again, the Impossible Escape here to give us extra max res. And that's basically that. At the end here, let's go over some frequently asked questions. Number one is, why no Doryanis? So as you guys all know, with the new Lake of Kalandra, you can actually get quite a bit of +2 accuracy on your rings, as well as that you can get percentage accuracy, and you can also get minus lightning res, making it a perfect candidate for Doryanis. So first up, I have to mention this. It's actually a cost to use these mirrored rings, because they're straight up worse than precursors. You lose around about 10% of your damage from a really, really strong mirrored ring versus what you get from a precursors. So from the get-go, you're actually paying to use a Doryani, so it's already a little bit of a downside. But in the end, it's all worth it because you get like minus 200 lightning res on the enemy. The problem literally just is that you cannot mitigate lightning dots. Even if you get, for example, an Eyes of the Great Wolf that converts 100% of lightning damage to fire, that does not count for lightning dots, right? So dots you would have to do with like a Mahuk Zodl shield. You would have to do it with a Glorious Vanity, which you both cannot do. You literally cannot do because you have to use Brutal Restraint and you kind of have to use Squire. So the TLDR will be, you're going to get randomly one-shot by Arch Nemesis with Mana Siphoners and by other bosses. Now, I will say this right here, Doryanis is incredibly strong in terms of damage. My point is, you don't really need it. If you invest this amount of Divines into a build, I don't want to randomly die. I don't want to think about it. But if you have a very targeted use where you know you're not going to come across any lightning dots, it's going to be fine, right? You're going to be totally fine. You can play the Doryanis version. There's a lot of videos out there. There is a lot of POBs on PoE Ninja. Check them out for sure. For me personally, at this sort of investment, I just don't want to get randomly one-shot. Now, why not Lightning Strike? I was actually playing Lightning Strike. The only reason was that I didn't really like it for mapping. Venom Gyre is just so smooth for mapping. Also, in the map layouts that we used, it wasn't really that good. There's a lot of pebbles on the ground. It would get stuck. So yeah, I would say if you want a boss, Lightning Strike is actually like miles ahead of Venom Gyre. If you like that playstyle, do it. I'm actually going to make a separate video about Lightning Strike. What would change with the build if you're interested in that? Sure, leave a sub, check that out in 1 or 2 days. So that's that reason. Lightning Strike is obviously fantastic. Third question was, why no Mageblood? So it would be kind of hypocritical of me to say that I don't use Mageblood because of budget, because this whole build is just crazy expensive, right? The reason I use Mageblood goes a little bit deeper. It's because Mageblood fixes so many problems in your build. You would fix your armor, you would fix your evasion, you would fix your mana cost. Whatever you want, you can fix it with a Mageblood. And the problem with that is, if I do that with my Mageblood, then the build is basically semi-worthless, because if you don't have a Mageblood, now you have to make a whole new build. So why even make the build in the first place? So that's the only reason why I don't use Mageblood. So of all the people asking in the comments, obviously Mageblood is the GG belt. At the end, budget, I don't really have any answer. The problem with these kind of emblems is, so I bought this one for 15 divines and this one for 20 divines. The simple answer is there's only so many on the market that usually when somebody makes a video, they go up to like a mirror. I can't do anything about it. It's either I don't share my builds at all, or I share them and people are going to be unhappy. I don't know what to do. Other than that, making claws that aren't perfect, this is basically the perfect claw other than level 18. If you just take away one of the mods, I would definitely play around in Craft of Exile and actually craft them yourselves. A lot of them are actually not mirror tier, the ones you see on Path of Exile. Just kind of try and make one. And if you can't do that, you can also use Replica Last Resorts. You dual wield them, you put on Petrified Blood, so you're always on low life, and you still do a ton of damage. Other than that, it just is what it is. Like I said in the intro, this is probably going to be my last real build for this league. It was kind of just something where I wanted to put in a lot of currency. If you're interested in a build that can do that, that's basically like a one build where you can just focus on it. You don't want to reroll all the time. this is a very good build for that. Overall, I hope you liked the video. Even if you can't afford the build or you don't want to play it, maybe you learned a thing or two, or maybe the hype around accuracy stackers in general. And yeah, see ya. But that's it for the video. If you liked it, give it a thumbs up. And if you haven't already, subscribe. As always, a huge shout out to my Twitch subscribers and my Patreons. I couldn't do videos like this without you. Thank you so much for the support. But yeah, really absurd build. Next up, we're going to go over the Lightning Strike version, which is just a tiny bit different, but it's still important to note. Obviously going to be a shorter video than this. If you play this, definitely check out Venom Gyre. Kobe did not disappoint when he just threw out Venom Gyre after Venom Gyre build. Absolutely fun skill. Definitely something you should check out eventually. But with that being said, since I still don't have a slogan, see you next time.